interesting. Not to mention, you need to think about killing that third hour on Raw, because 3 hours of live TV with wrestling is really ridiculous. Every week, I think Raw could be cut back to 2 hours. We could go back to the 2-hour era for Raw, and SmackDown could remain at 2 hours, because 4 hours of live TV every week, with a difference of probably 48 hours producing one live show after another, really is sufficient enough. You don't really need a third hour for Raw. I know that with pay-per-views, being critical, of course, with the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and SummerSlam happening every year, Survivor Series, a third hour could be necessary to create storylines and hype up and promote pay-per-views, but you don't really need it now when you're producing 4 hours as opposed to 5 hours of TV with your two main shows being Raw and SmackDown, and really now becoming NXT. NXT's thrown in there as well, on the network as well, main events in there, so you really don't need 5 hours of TV like that happening every week. I think 4 hours of live TV is sufficient enough. And I think that with how it's being live, it doesn't really need to be happening, and it doesn't really need to be overkill as much as what it has. Now, I have remembered SmackDown storylines from 2004 to 2005. They were fantastic, so I hope that with the brand split we see better storylines happening for SmackDown. Something of interest really needs to be happening for SmackDown, because I think that more fans are just tuning in to see Raw because they realize, they've realized in years past that really everything happens on Raw, especially in the fall of the pay-per-views and the week prior. To pay-per-views, everything happens on Raw as opposed to SmackDown, which is really your recap show that every week, filling you in on what happened on Raw in case you missed it. So I hope that SmackDown really becomes, a follow-up to what happens on Raw in the way of it being live. And really with it being live now, it's really necessary that it needs to be a follow-up show to Raw rather than a recap show of what happens, because I think that more creative storylines and following us up from what happened on Raw is really necessary to happen with this brand split. And I'm also hoping that we see key superstars drafted to SmackDown if we do see a brand split, with everything happening with the struggle for power, with the McMahons in the way of people like Apollo Crews, probably Sami Zayn getting a more prominent push with the company, because if you think about it, pushes of Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens is one way of looking at it, but when you see more superstars now being given an opportunity to be created because of the brand split happening between Raw and SmackDown with respective general managers and the competition factor really having been missed with wrestling, I think the possibilities are really endless for a chance to create superstars, because we've seen SmackDown create superstars in the past, as we've seen for Raw, like Edge is a superstar that you can use as an example. Eddie Guerrero is a superstar you can use as an example. SmackDown's really been known for producing point A superstars who've really been dead on with their characters, and we've seen great champions created from SmackDown, and that's really one of the biggest reasons why they first had the idea of the brand split years ago, because wrestlers like Edge and Eddie Guerrero probably would have never been given a chance. Chris Benoit, who's a name that's never mentioned enough with professional wrestling, would have never been given a chance and been a chance to become world champion. So I think that is something that's a key point as well, to expect to see superstars being created who probably never would have been given that of an opportunity in the way of creative storylines, because SmackDown's really been known as a show to create superstars and really put out names like Eddie Guerrero and Edge in the past. Having a champion like Goldberg or Brock Lesnar is one way of looking at it, but to have a champion in the way of an Apollo Crews, I think times are really changing, and I think times are changing for the better with professional wrestling for this brand split. One thing to be expected is a significant boost in the ratings for SmackDown. That's something I'm really looking forward to, because SmackDown's really not been putting out in the way of ratings because of how it's been taped for years, and with this being 20 years in the making for being a live show, we've seen a scattered live SmackDown here and there, but never a weekly episodic SmackDown being live. So we can see a significant boost in the ratings as well, better reviews for SmackDown and all the shows outside of Raw, because really Raw has been considered the primary show that everybody watches, expecting things to happen in the fall of events like WrestleMania and SummerSlam. That's been the way for years of professional wrestling, so at least now we can expect to see something more promising happening on SmackDown with significant boosts in the ratings and better reviews than what it's been receiving, because I've been reading these ridiculous reviews for SmackDown for years, with how history's had a tendency to repeat itself, and with how the same things always been happening week in and week out on Raw and SmackDown, and for SmackDown more especially. So I'm hoping we're going to be seeing higher ratings and better reviews written in the way of columns that are posted on these wrestling news websites, which people can't seem to get enough of, in the way of reviews for shows like NXT and SmackDown, because really, wrestling is really happening now on NXT and SmackDown if you haven't really noticed, because the superstars who are considered, the mid-carders are getting the chance to perform in the main events on SmackDown. It's been happening for the better part of the last 2 years, like Dolph Ziggler versus Seth Rollins was a main event that I keep going back to, in the way of how Dolph Ziggler received a promising push, especially in the follow-up Survivor Series from 2 years ago, when Sting helped put over someone like a Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler was in the main events against Seth Rollins, and he was beating names like Seth Rollins in the way that Edges and Eddie Guerrero's of the past were given the chance to main event against superstars like Triple H and Brock Lesnar. They would have never been given that chance if not for the brand split as well. You know, you have the chance to create split branded pay-per-views. I hope they bring that idea back. I really miss the whole idea of, you know, split branded pay-per-views. You know, Raw would be exclusive 1 month on pay-per-view, the next month would be SmackDown, and then every once in a while they would come together for a combined pay-per-view in the way of WrestleMania and SummerSlam. Remember when we had exclusive pay-per-views to Raw and SmackDown and even ECW? Remember back in the day when that would happen and then they'd come together for their biggest shows. I hope we see that happening as well. I really think that Vince McMahon has really missed the competition factor ever since he purchased WCW and ECW and even other territories. You know, I think he's really missed that competition factor, and in years we've seen gone past professional wrestling, the competition factor has really been missing. So I hope we see more superstars created and the competition factor is restored within the wrestling, of course, because we don't really see a whole lot of competition within wrestling anymore like we did in 2004 and 2005, and storylines that were definitely far more superior between the brands than what we've been seeing in recent years, because as I mentioned, you know, it seems like SmackDown is really a recap show, and that's really what it's become known for within the last 5 years, as opposed to creating just as good storylines as Raw. I remember watching SmackDown from years prior and thinking that the SmackDown storylines were far better than Raw's storylines, because I thought at one point or another, you know, Raw was dominated so much by evolution as opposed to what was happening on SmackDown with Brock Lesnar or Eddie Guerrero as being champion in feuds like Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle. You know, I thought that storylines were far better on SmackDown on times. So I hope I feel like that watching SmackDown in the fall of this brand extension, because I think it's really needed, because I thought that, you know, sometimes over the years the SmackDown storylines would be better than Raw, and on times I thought the Raw storylines were better than SmackDown. So the competition is something that I really missed. Superstars being created and competition are things that I've really missed. So I hope that's restored in the way, and also credibility is restored to SmackDown with how it's going live now. And obviously there's a lot of confidence with the creative, and also there's got to be a lot of pressure in the way of putting out storylines. You know, storyline writers in the way of Freddie Prinze Jr. haven't really been getting it done. And I really hope that Paul Heyman really puts out his innovative ideas he did years ago in the way of putting out, in the way of being a creative writer for the SmackDown team. So there's a lot that could happen, and I'm hoping that we all benefit as wrestling fans from this brand extension. If you have a thought on the brand extension, you can get in on the conversation on my Facebook page at HEW Entertainment, on Twitter at Jonathan Clarke1, in the comments of this video blog, on my YouTube channel at Jonathan Clarke22, and on Google Plus at HEW Entertainment are some of the ways you can get in on the conversation if you have a thought on the upcoming brand split. I hope it happens. I was hoping it wasn't going to be happening for a little while longer. I hope they were going to put it off until at least WrestleMania 33, but if it happens halfway through the year, we may be missing out on a few key things, but I hope only good things will happen from the brand split, the first brand split really in the last at least 5 through 6 years. I know it's really the primary conversation on these wrestling news websites, so I thought I would get in on the conversation and offer you somewhat of a thought on the brand split. I know only good things can happen from it. I know a lot of negative things could happen in the way of reviews from the brand split, because people could prefer Raw over SmackDown, people could prefer SmackDown over Raw. There are a lot of ways this could go, but I think it's a really exciting time to be a wrestling fan. So if you haven't got in on the conversation of professional wrestling, I think the time is now, because the times have changed with wrestling. There was no question about that, but I think that with the times changing, we as an industry and we as fans have to change our opinions, which sometimes have been really negative about professional wrestling in recent years, but they don't have to be as negative as what they've been in recent years because of everything happening in the way of promising things. We've seen more creative stars come into the business, and I think with how the industry's changed over the years, our opinions as wrestling fans could change with it as well. The brand split has been rumored. It's been talked about on professional wrestling news websites. Do you think it's a legitimate report? Because I know sometimes it's really difficult to decipher, you know, what's legit and what's not professional wrestling, but if this is a legit report, I think only good things can happen from it. I'm your host, Jonathan Clarke. What's to be seen with professional wrestling, God only knows over the next couple of weeks, because as has been said, you know, anything can happen in WWE, but I think it's an exciting time to be a wrestling fan, especially when it comes to the brand split, because there's a lot of things that could happen from it. I will archive this video on my YouTube channel as a featured video, possibly for you to get in on the conversation about it if you got a thought on it. The brand split, only good things can happen from it. I'm your host, Jonathan Clarke, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening to my show this week, and I hope you subscribe if you haven't already to youtube.com/JonathanClarke22, where there's a lot of videos that I've been posting in the way of conversation, and I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on the brand split. I will talk to you again next week. Like what you hear? Tell us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
to this. Sometimes you gotta stay in, and you know where I live. Yeah, you know what we is. Sometimes you gotta stay in. Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go around. Welcome to my house, play that music too loud. Show me what you do now. We don't have to go around. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my house. Morning comes and you know that you wanna stay. Close the blinds, let's pretend that the time has changed. Keep our clothes on the floor, open up champagne. Let's continue tonight, come on, celebrate. That's how we do. Sometimes you gotta stay in, and you know where I live. Yeah, you know what we is. Sometimes you gotta stay in. Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go out. Welcome to my house, play that music too loud. Show me what you do now. We don't have to go out. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my duck off the crib, the spot, the pad. But my house is your house if you throwing it back. Excuse me if my home draining is sad. Soon as these happy faces land, you can run with the cash. Home run, slam dunk, touchdown pass. Mi casa es tu casa, so it ain't no holding back. Another shot of vodka, you know what's in my glass.